fellas, what's going on? It's Preacher. I'm 6.2 looming. It's time to cover all those small things. I was hoping to cover them on the web show, but we got so enthralled with our legendary discussion, which I encourage you to check out if you haven't, that I didn't have time to do it. And I know there's not been many videos this week, but don't worry, the wait will be worth it, I assure you. Let's cover all those small things now. I've been on the PTR every single day to try and get some cool stuff for you, because 6.2 is kind of covered in controversy with content, no content. People pissed, some people really excited, and a little bit of general confusion from the mixed amount of players in the playbase. Understandable, in my opinion. Absolutely understandable. And hopefully I can shed some light on all those little things that are coming out in 6.2 and some various ideas on them after testing some of that content. So firstly, let's get the WoW tokens out of the way. I have mentioned it in the past. I think it's a great thing. The gold inflation in Warlords is immense. Thanks to the garrison system. There's just so much gold flying around in the hands of people who don't know how to make gold. You know, didn't know how to play the auction house, didn't know how to do all those things or be a little bit savvy. And now there's a lot of gold in the game. So sucking some of that out and providing a legal way of sorting out things like that is really cool. It deters, you know, it deters hackers and stuff to some extent. Not going to solve the problem, obviously, but I think every MMO needs a reasonably legal way of acquiring that kind of thing in-game. I really do. There's a lot of people who work all the fucking time, but they still enjoy MMOs, and they just don't have the time to maybe log in and do garrisons and stuff every day and all that kind of stuff. And therefore, they have a lot of disposable income to go ahead and make some gold. So I have no issue with it. I think it's fine. I don't think it hurts anybody. And eventually, hopefully, it will sort of restore the economy in some fashion, which at the moment is a little bit crazy. I certainly think Blizzard's looking towards the next expansion and thinking, everybody might be coming into here with a hell of a lot of gold. MMO Champion recently did some statistics, and there are a lot of people with a shitload of gold in the millions. Okay, so based off a small sample size, of course, where people could be lying their ass off. So the tokens thing I'm absolutely fine with. Let's talk 5-mans. Lots of stuff coming with the 5-mans, but some people are really pissed at it. We've got Timewalker holidays coming. Now, that's the important word here. Holidays. They are holidays that are coming, which means that you won't be having access to them all the time. What are they? They basically are scaling you down. Now, I've done these dungeons. What they do is they scale you down to the appropriate level. So if it's TBC, they scale you down to level 70 in order to do those dungeons on heroic mode. Now, I was not excited by this. Some people were. Why? They started the game at different times. And in many ways, we brought this on our goddamn selves. Those of us who did that content, and I am guilty of this, my favourite ever heroics I thought were the best ever in the game were the TBC heroics. And I've said that repeatedly. So players who never experienced that hear all the time that the best heroics were probably TBC around that era. It's like, they were great. You don't know what you were missing. So Blizzard's like, well, let's see what we can do. A couple of problems with that after having tested them. And Blizzard had to release a caveat. A caveat. As soon as they released the stuff for testing, they went, hey, whoa. Loads of people are asking for this because it's relevant content for them because they never got to do it. So we're sort of giving you the chance to go and do it. But, here's a big but. The game is nothing like it was then. Okay? Just bear that in mind. So Blizzard's like, hey, here's this new 5-man, kind of. But bear in mind, the game is nothing like it was then when we released this stuff. Now, what does that actually translate to? These dungeons are incredibly easy. Incredibly easy. One of the saddest things about it, really, for me. And not to get down on it. A lot of people have been saying I've been down on WoW recently. But this is the truth. This is a fact. The Shattered Halls, notorious in its day for being extremely difficult. I mean, this thing had a 1-hour speed run. Bear that in mind for 2 seconds. The speed run for getting the attunement was an hour for a 5-man. Yeah, it was a big fucking deal, and that wasn't easy. That wasn't easy to defeat that dungeon in 1 hour. Doing it, well, let me put it this way. The bosses died so quickly that they couldn't do their mechanics. What do I mean by that? Let's say, take Kargath Bladefist. His most dangerous ability and the thing that he does is called the Blade Fist, where he literally tore people apart. A typical run in the Burning Crusade would involve 2 phases of the Blade Fist if you didn't have extremely good DPS. So you would have a burn phase, then the Blade Fist, which would probably maybe kill 1 person, or especially a Clothies were at serious risk at that point. Then another burn phase in the middle, and then another Blade Fist where you hope to survive and then kill him afterwards. That was a sort of typical encounter. But you can now kill him before he does a single one. So he's just a sack of health, really. And yeah, similarly with the Ogre boss before that, who had an aggro table ability where he'd choose somebody lower down the aggro table and then fixate on them because he had 2 heads. Very clever mechanic is that he would choose someone else to attack. It's like, I don't agree with my right head. Left head is going to go and attack something else. But he dies before he does that mechanic as well. So this is going to create some confusion, which is why I wonder, honestly, the general question is, and this isn't being downy, is that who is this content for? If it's for the guys like myself who are supposed to get a bit nostalgic about this and maybe want a chance to revisit that content, I found myself, and as anybody else who did it at the time will go in and go, well, it's nothing like this. I remember this room being really hard. I remember this being really difficult. I remember we had to use this technique in order to do this. And you can just pull everything in AoE down now. So, yeah, in that respect, it's not nostalgic at all. It almost makes you crave for a previous time. If I'm being honest, doing it again on its easier mode was like, you know, I kind of wish it was back to the old way, which was a little bit harder. If it's those people who have heard how good these dungeons were and want to experience it for themselves, they won't get that either. Although they may come away with the illusion of having done it. And maybe that will even cause some more issues where people are going, you told me Shattered Halls Heroic was really, really hard. I just rocked in with my boys and just absolutely smashed the place. You guys are a bunch of pussies in rose-tinted goggles and all that. So, a little confusing. But it is only a temporary holiday, a little bit of fun. Bear in mind, before we get all too serious, it is a bit of fun, really. And it comes off the back. This is the thing. We are not getting new 5-mans. That's not happening. But Blizzard did release a comment. I've linked it down below. They put quite a lengthy post up explaining that from a business perspective, making new 5-man content mid-expansion is a waste of their time. Yeah. It was a bit between the lines, but that's essentially what they said, is there is no point in us making mid-expansion 5-man content. And they had good reasons for it, which I totally understand. Not that I agree with it. Basically, if they make new 5-mans like they did in ICC and like they did with TOC and all that kind of stuff where we got new 5-mans mid-expansion, what happens is the item level must be higher than the previous 5-mans. So all of those 5-mans instantly become useless, okay? Because the better gear is in the much more limited space of, say, 3 5-mans. So we instantly lose the 7 or 8 5-mans we've got now. And people either outgear them very quickly, so it becomes irrelevant again. Similar to the first wave of 5-mans at the beginning of the expansion, they very quickly become outdated as well. So that content might take a hell of a long time to make, to produce, to develop, and it doesn't get much life out of it, and maybe that resource can be spent elsewhere. So from that perspective, totally get it. I get it. I understand what you're saying. But from a player perspective, I don't give a shit. And that might sound really fucking arsey, but I want something new. It's been months. I would like some different area to go in 5-mans to go. If I'm going to play an alt, which is kind of mandatory in WoD, especially if you're a raider or a high-end PvPer, you very quickly outgear any of the content outside of your chosen field. Then yeah, I want a new environment that I can occasionally go into. I absolutely do. So Blizzard's other answer to that is the Mythic dungeons. I'm sure many of you are wondering how hard they are. Well, we went into the Mythic dungeons about... Let's put it in some context, first of all. With 5 raiders, Mythic raiders, you are scaled to 660. We were playing on default UI for the most part. You can copy your UI over, but we had to emergency copy some characters over to make sure we had a tank and healer and whatnot, so I switched over to a tank. Very quickly copied my pally over. You get scaled to 660 anyway. Okay, 660 item level. And off we went. It was 3 AM. It was after our full raid night and, of course, the PTR testing raiding that was going on at that same time. So once we finished up, very tired. We wiped once, I think, inside there, but just by... Basically, we were being a bit blasé in the beginning because it wasn't too hard and then pulled way too much. And, yeah, we died in there. So, a reasonable challenge, I would say. Bear that in mind, because default UI is terrible. I'm sure I was running around without slices and dice. Well, I was tanking for the most part, but missing something. Sacred Shield, probably. Just because I haven't got my usual trackers for that kind of information, and the default UI is absolute arse. But, yeah, it was okay. It's a reasonable enough challenge, honestly. It really is a reasonable enough challenge. So... what about the item level drops? I mean, 680 blues is what's dropping in there, and an item level 700 reward. You only get to do it once a week per character, per dungeon. That's a lot of gear to be giving people as a catch-up mechanic. I like that it's kind of, you have to have a pre-made to it, so that's kind of worthy of a little higher item level, but that's Mythic Blackrock Foundry level gear, which is a little too high for 5-man content in my opinion. And it does feel, and some of the guys in the group were already saying, is that you will just be running your alts through there. Because one, with a preset group from your guild or friends or whatever, you're bound to have a much better time than LFR, and you can gear very, very quickly with less loot dispersion going on amongst the raid. So yeah, I kind of get it. It feels a little like the scenarios did, where they gave very good rewards for not too difficult content. And I feel that's the way it's going. Again, no new mechanics, though, I will say. Why did we wipe? Things just hit way harder. So if you get caught in a fear or a stun or something like that, and you can't break it, then yeah, everything hits way harder. So you tend to fall over a little bit quicker, and things have way more health. No new mechanics. I would have loved to have seen that. If you're going to make it so we have to do the same dungeons again that we've already been doing since the beginning of the expansion, then that would have been wonderful to have some new mechanics in there to really sort of switch things up and add a bit of spice to it. But no. What I will say, though, and maybe this is the good point, is if it's very commonplace to not know what happens in 5-mans, especially these days. If one person understands the mechanics, you can generally kill the boss. It does seem in Mythic that you really need to know what you're supposed to do in that fight. So whether it's kill the ads or interrupt certain spells or purge something, that's much more beneficial in the Mythic level. Much more beneficial, and perhaps that will go some way towards educating the player base on the finer points of little mechanics and putting some more responsibility on them because there's less players. So from that perspective, I kind of like it. I kind of like it. Regarding the naval missions, a lot of people asking about them. It's confusing, to say the least, because most people are sick and tired of the garrison stuff, and we talked about the garrison prison thing earlier in the expansion, is that they're adding another secondary system, which is exactly the same. It is exactly the same as your garrison missions that you already do. And that's a little bit weird, because I have this weird sort of skepticism that this will be a real undoing of the player base. People already feel, as I said earlier, you need an alt. If you're a reasonable player, you need an alt to enjoy the outside content, because if you're a raider or a high-end PvP, a lot of the content is completely pointless to you. You just don't need Apexis and all that kind of stuff. It's useless. You don't need to recruit followers because you've already got 50 or something, and 25 don't even do anything. That kind of thing going on. So it strikes me as a little bit odd that the thing that people are finding the most tiresome, which is managing garrisons, especially across their alts, they're adding another separate system to that. And they seem to be trying to sort of backtrack it by saying, we're not going to upgrade the item level on the followers in your original garrison. Your original garrison is basically done and dusted. There's no level 4 buildings coming, which people were kind of excited about, with the possibilities of expanding the garrison or customizing it better. That's not happening. What we're going to do is introduce a new garrison system, which is starting from scratch, because you have to recruit new followers, which have special naval skills, different crew types, different abilities to counter the things that you have in the water. And that's going to drop the new stuff. So your new coins will come from there. Your new gear will come from there, from Hellfire Citadel. They will all be naval-based. Your legendary rings involve the naval missions as well. So the only issue I see with this is, I don't mind the garrison missions too much. They're very quick, especially with add-ons. Is that people will feel the need to add a second layer of stuff to do when they log into their characters. Most people log in and out in their garrisons, and when they log in, they check their missions, they fire them off, and maybe then they log their alts and do the same thing. Now you have another tier to do, and not only that, it's not next to each other, so you might find yourself in this situation where you feel the need to do your missions in your garrison main, and then run down to the docks and do them again there, and that could become really irksome really quickly. That could be a thing that's going to happen, and I really worry, especially for those with a lot of alts who are just like, you know what? I feel, and I know somebody will say you don't have to do it, but so I feel when I log in and I just have to go a few steps to complete this stuff, that I have to do it, and it's too much. Because it's already too much for some people. The garrison system is already too much for some people. So I can only assume this content was in development for a long time before people really started to get a little bit uptight about the garrison stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. It looks cool. It's interesting. It's nice to get the new boats. They have some nice modifications. The prices have been fixed on the PTR. No doubt we'll see some changes. It's no longer 5k. It's like 150 resources to get your naval docks up and running. So no doubt that will change again at some point. Well, so far, that's 6.2 in a nutshell. The garrison campaign is something else I want to touch on. It's really quite nice. I've done most of the garrison campaign on the PTR now, at least what's available to me, and it has been a lot of fun. It's been more interesting than the initial garrison campaign. There are still some elements of fill the bar, which is always sort of like you know, it's like a throwaway idea. It's like, well, let's just add a fill the bar thing. But the story and the cutscenes has actually been really nice, so that's something to look forward to in my opinion. I understand why it's a mixed bag, because obviously the Timewalker stuff, if you did that stuff originally, is not content for you, similar to me. It's not content for me, but I understand for a lot of people it is content, so that's why those arguments are there, which no one's ever going to win. We would all prefer new stuff, I think, is the message we can leave behind. So far, 6.2 looks pretty cool. Pretty cool. I'm enjoying my time on the PTR. Let's see how it plays out long term. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.